Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I've got a full tutorial video, a full process tutorial from start to finish on how I do all of my digital drawings at the moment. I've done one previously a few months, I want to say, or a year back even, but obviously my process is ever changing because I keep finding cool new things to do. And so I thought I'd give you an updated digital drawing tutorial on how I do everything that you see in the final digital drawings you see on my Instagram and stuff. Yeah, so I'll be showing you all the layers that I use, how I use them, what brushes I use, and the order in which I do things when I draw on Procreate from sketch to finish. But before we get into it, let's hear a quick word from today's sponsors, Atlas Coffee Club. Guys, I'm only human and I love coffee, but like many of us, I can sometimes get bored of buying the same exact coffee every month and drinking the same thing all the time. So when Atlas Coffee Club reached out to me, I was so excited. Atlas Coffee Club is a coffee subscription that curates the world's best coffee and delivers it to your door. With over 50 countries around the globe producing amazing coffee, their mission is to connect you to the world's best. From Papua New Guinea to Peru, Burundi to Brazil, each month Atlas Coffee Club highlights and delivers coffee and culture from a new country. Each month, not only do subscribers get amazing coffee from a new country, but they also get a postcard from the country and a coffee country card that gives you the coffee country's history, tasting notes, and context about what makes that coffee special and unique. This time I got some delicious coffee from Brazil, which is, by the way, so delicious. I've had some since, obviously, and it is so yummy. And obviously the tasting notes on the card are very true to life. I really enjoyed it. One of the most exciting things about coffee from around the world is that each country has a unique and delicious flavor profile to discover. And that's true because I haven't had this Brazil coffee yet, and it was definitely the tastiest one I've had so far. Did you know that coffee actually has over 800 aromatic and flavor compounds? The Atlas service is tailored to your perfect coffee. It's roasted to your desired coffee roast type from light to dark. You can get your coffee as whole beans or have a customized coffee ground to your preferred brewing method. And of course, the coffee is delivered at your cadence with easy flexibility to adjust the quantity or to your schedule. You can pause, skip, or cancel at any time. And if that wasn't enough, on top of that, all of Atlas's coffee is roasted to order, which means you can't get coffee any fresher. And to just make the deal a little bit sweeter, Atlas pays above fair trade prices for all of their coffees and prioritizes sustainability. Atlas is offering my viewers 50% off your first bag of coffee. So make sure to go to the link in the description or on screen right now, atlascoffeeclub.com/pipa, and get your first coffee bag half off. Discover a world of amazing coffee with Atlas's Coffee World Tour. And yeah, thank you so much, Atlas Coffee Club, for sponsoring today's video and being a supporter of the channel. And with all that said, let's get into today's video. So I'm actually going to be using this sketch that I did a few months ago in my sketchbook as a base sketch, and I think it was actually from reference of a picture that Jung Ho-yeon, the really cute girl from Squid Games, and it was a picture that she posted on Instagram that I thought was really cute. So let's get into it. I imported that sketch into Procreate and lowered the opacity so that I could draw over it, and I quickly did the line art in a dark red pencil using my round wet sketch brush from Bluessatan's brush pack. And just a forewarning, I used that exact brush for like everything, so that's pretty much the only brush you'll need. Next up, I turned that line art layer into a multiply layer, and this is very important because whatever layer I put underneath it, like you can see here, is actually going to turn it into colored line art. I also like to turn my background into like a gray color because that makes the colors that I put down a lot more true to life. It just kind of creates a neutral background for the colors to come out a lot more true to life. So on the first new layer that I've created and put underneath my line art, I go in with the freehand select tool and actually start selecting the areas that I want to do the base flat colors for all the elements. And I use this because I just know that it's going to create like a really opaque, harsh edged base flat color. If I use a brush for it, my round wet sketch brush has like different opacities at different pen pressures, so it's never really guaranteed that I'll have a full opacity base layer. So I go in with a select brush and then just use the fill tool or the color fill tool to create the flats for all of the different elements. And I'll put each element on a different layer so that I can like easily change the color of that particular object or that particular area quite easily. So as you can see here, I didn't like the initial color I put down for her jacket, so I just kind of went in with different shades of brown to see which one I liked best. Then I just kind of continued that same process for every single element in the drawing so that everything was on a different layer and it was easily accessible. But honestly, if things aren't touching, like for example, her hair and the backpack never touch, I will usually put those two on the same layer just to, minimize creating too many layers. Because on Procreate, depending on the size canvas you have, there's only there's a maximum number of layers you can create. I use really big canvases, so that can be an issue at times. So yeah, if you can compile some things into the same layer, even better. Yeah, that also goes for her jewelry and whatever different like accessories that she might be using. And then once I'm happy with all the flat colors, I'll actually go into every layer and alpha lock them. And this is just going to make rendering every layer a lot easier because I like to use a big brush and kind of do like, crazy big strokes. And this just makes sure that everything that I draw stays within that flat base color layer. So usually I'll start off with the skin because obviously I just love rendering the face and things like that. So I'll color pick the base color that I did the flat color for and pick a darker and more saturated color and just start adding the shadows and the highlights and things like that to all of the areas that are skin. I just start adding in all the flat shadows and start building the three-dimensionality of the object. And I'll do the exact same for the highlights. So I'll color pick the medium tone, so the mid-tone that I chose for the flat color, and then slide that color pick tool in a diagonal towards the top left corner for a lighter color, and then just start adding the highlight tone into all of the areas that would be highlighted, funnily enough. And I'll start doing that all across the face, and as well as her hands and her legs and etc. And obviously in my head I will have picked the light source, so obviously my light source is coming from like the top left here. That's why everything that's being hit from that light source is getting highlighted. This is also the opportunity that I'll take to color in the rest of the areas of her face, so coloring in the whites of her eyes and the irises and her lips and any blushing that I haven't added in yet. So I'll just start rendering all that and adding in the shadows and the highlights on all of those separate elements. And again, I'm doing all of this on the same layer that I did my flats for the base color for the skin. So yeah, then I'll get a big brush and start doing all the blushing with like a more pinkyish version of the base color that I used. And I also will go in with that blush color onto like her knees and her fingers and her knuckles, basically any areas of like thin skin that need a bit of blushing. So then I'll basically repeat that process for all the other layers that I've done. So adding in the highlights and the shadows to all the other bits. So I went into her hair and added highlights in the area that would be getting hit by my light source, as well as the backpack, her jacket, her shoes, etc. And this is why I really love digital drawing, is because it's just so mindless process drawing. Like you just kind of just sit back and your brain can easily just shut off, and you can just kind of go with the flow and add these little like shadows and highlights, and just, yeah, I just find it really soothing and relaxing. It's kind of like a puzzle. I just like to like add all the shadows in the right place and then all the highlights in the right place, kind of like a color by numbers, really. I'll just keep adding darker shadows to the different elements, so I'll usually have up to like 3 tones of shadows, so I'll just keep going darker and darker until I reach like the highest points of contrast and create a bigger disparity between the midpoint and the darkest point. And the same goes for the highlights. I can keep going lighter, and if there are bits that are being like super highlighted by the light source. I also forgot to draw in her eyebrows, but I ideally would have drawn those in or colored those in back when I was doing the face. And again, I'm still using that round wet sketch brush from the Bluesssatan brush pack. Like it's my ride or die. I will use it for everything. So yeah, I will keep going into all the different areas of the drawing and adding in the highlights and the shadows. The shoes in this particular drawing were super fun to draw out. I love drawing a shiny shoe. They're just so fun to draw, like all the reflections on them and stuff. They're just a good time, really. Finishing up adding the highlights to her legs to contrast all the shadows that I'd done, and also her hands, of course. Adding in any details like her nails. If they're colored nails, I'll add the colored nails here. Adding a bit of rim lighting is always my favorite thing too. So adding like a little stripe of the highlight color to the far edge in the side of the shadow. It's a really good trick to create like three-dimensionality on your shapes. So next up, my final details process in my digital drawing is actually creating a layer and putting it above the line art layer. So up until now, we've been drawing on and coloring in layers that are below the line art layer that's in a multiply layer. So now we're actually creating a layer on top of the line art. And as you can see here, anything you draw will be covering the line art layer, which is what we want, because this will be where we add all the really intense details that need to be like drawn over a line or highlighted areas. For example, like on the lips here, as you can see, I'm drawing over the little shadows that I did in the line art section and doing the little, highlights in her iris, doing the eyelashes, because I want it all to be a uniform color and I don't want the colored line art to be getting in the way of that. So I'll usually do all of my like final details on this layer, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of the process because everything just looks so crisp and really just graphic-y. It's just really satisfying. I really enjoy this part of the process. It's kind of when the drawing starts coming together, really. As you can see here, just adding the eyelashes and all these tiny details that are unobstructed by colored line art. It just really makes them all pop. And then, yeah, I'll just kind of go through the drawing and see what needs like that final bit of rendering. So I'll usually do like all of the rendering on any jewelry that my character's wearing in this layer as well, as you'll see in a bit. I'll do like the highest points of contrast on the face and even some like textures on the face. So I'll use like a smaller brush and do a bit of cross hatching with any shading that I'm doing just to create a bit of a texture, because I think that it looks really cool. I just don't like it when drawings look too airbrushed or too smooth. I like having a bit of texture in there and a bit of cross hatching, but that's just my personal preference. Adding in a bit of highlights to the eyebrows is also really nice, adding a different shade to the eyebrows to create a bit of three-dimensionality. And yeah, just kind of going through the drawing, seeing what's missing, what needs more contrast or what needs a darker shadow to accentuate the highlight next to it. It takes a lot of playing around and zooming out and then zooming in, because looking at your piece from far out is one of the most important things you can do to see what's missing where. So this layer on top of the line art actually comes into play the most when rendering the hair. As you can see here, the hair kind of just looks a bit like really chunky and like big chunks of hair and also kind of like blending in together. But my favorite part is going into the hair on this like layer on top of everything and adding all these individual hair strands, because it just makes it look really rendered, and also adding in the highest pops of highlight here. As you can see, it's just super satisfying and it makes the hair look like completely different than it had up until now. So here I'm just rendering the jewelry that she's wearing, and again, as I said, I do render all of the jewelry in this details layer as usual, just because I want it to be really crisp and highlighted, because usually the jewelry is such a small element of a drawing compared to the rest of it, because jewelry is quite tiny. So I want it to really stand out and pop out and yeah, just be really crisp. So I'll do it in this layer. I'll add the shadows and the pops of highlight to the jewelry, and then later on you'll see that I also add like a little lens flare, or like a little light flare to the earrings as a reflection, which really makes it pop as well. On this layer, I'll also add in like the highest points of reflection on the shoes or anything that's shiny, because obviously it draws on top of any line art or any bit of rendering that you've already done, and it just basically makes it stand out the most. So the highest points of contrast and highlight I will do on this layer as well. And I'll keep doing that process for every element of the drawing. So I'm working on the bag here, but then I also go into the jacket and do that. I also add in all the little tiny details, as I said, in this layer. So I actually went in and added some sort of like yellowish copper stitching details to the bag on this layer. You'll see it in a bit, but it's a very tiny detail, but because it is on this layer that's on top of everything, it really stands out, and it adds that little pop of detail that is like intriguing to the eye. So I got this like sort of yellowish coppery color and just added a teeny tiny little dotted line along some of the stitching of the bag to make it look really like high-end and pretty. And it just added a bit more detail to that area of the drawing. Obviously there's a lot of detail on her face at the top and at the bottom right of the drawing, and I wanted to keep the composition balanced, so I added a bit more detail to the left side of the drawing just to make it all sort of balanced. I also continued on that stitching detail on her shoes, sort of around the sole of her shoe, just to make it really nice and pretty and detailed. I just kind of then added in some higher points of contrast, so adding in some darker shadows where needed, just to create more of a contrast in that area, because obviously the bit in her chest is going to be the darkest area because it's in direct shadow of where she's getting hit from light from behind. So I wanted to create that area the darkest in the drawing to create a higher amount of contrast in the rest of the drawing. The best way to create more contrast and depth within a drawing is to add in more shadows and highlights. That will just basically create a bigger like three-dimensionality to your drawing. So that's why I keep going back and forth, adding more shadows and more highlights just to basically create that depth. Here, as you can see, I'm just adding in that lens flare and messing about with it to be in the position that I want. And I also messed about with the opacity of it. And that was pretty much me getting to the end of the drawing. I just ended up adding some sparkles, obviously, because no drawing in my life is finished without some sparkles. And then I added my signature stamp onto the drawing. I have a whole video over on my Patreon on a tutorial on how to create this stamp brush. And then I just kind of messed about with the stars. I usually use these kind of sparkles for a reason, actually. It's not just because I think it's cute, but I like to use them to sort of balance out any composition. So that top right corner there is a bit empty, right, in the composition, just because of the way she's posed. So I like to add in some sparkles there to put something there so that it doesn't look empty. So that's what I use sparkles mainly for. So at the end here, I just select all of my layers and zoom out a lot to make sure that my drawing is properly centered in the drawing. And I actually kept the background as a gray color because I liked the way that it looked. Usually around this time is when I'll like change the background color, but I quite like the gray, so I kept it. And yeah, that was the finished drawing and my whole process from start to finish on how I created it. And that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know if there was anything that you learned today that you didn't know beforehand down there in the comments. I hope you enjoyed it, at least, even if you didn't learn anything. Make sure to check out my Patreon and my online shop down there. You get a lot of exclusive content and a lot of like new goodies and things on my Patreon. And my online shop is also currently open if you'd like to buy a little thing maybe. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.